Um, Welcome to the first co-hosted webinar between BeluxCham and Nordcham. My name is Bart. I'm the chairman of the Belgian-Luxembourg Chamber of Commerce here in Vietnam. And very, very exciting lineup today of speakers for a very interesting topic. And we have also a very enthusiastic audience. That means you, because I must say it's the first time ever that we have received so many questions in advance before we even started to talk about the topic, which means it's either a very relevant topic or at least it's a topic where people really pay interest or in. So, without further ado, welcome on behalf of the boards of both BeluxCham and Nordcham. I'll give the floor to my colleague Wei, who will take us further through the agenda of today and to do the introduction of the speakers. Wei, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Bart. Yes, my name is Tue Thomassen, and I'm the chairman of the Nordic Chamber of Commerce. First of all, big thanks to Bart and Mervyn from BeluxCham for taking the initiative to this excellent webinar where we both can look at the new developments in logistics and also celebrate 1 year of the EU-Vietnam free trade agreement and the impact that has on our businesses. So my job today is to make sure the train runs on time, and I will try my best to make that happen. We have a very compressed, very crisp program here, where we're gonna get into every angle around what this new initiative means for logistics at a time where I think everybody are looking for new logistics possibilities or trying to get everything to work out in managing the logistics of the business. We have 3 experts in the sector around the topic here. So first we will hear from Maersk, the logistics company, and we're going to hear from Customs Square, and also the Wallonian Export and Investment Agency. So each of the speakers will give their perspective on how to utilize this opportunity best in your business. So without further ado, I will introduce the first speaker. It's Per-Henry Grind. He is the head of retail and lifestyle at A.P. Møller - Mærsk in Vietnam. And he will start off giving us an overview of what is happening globally right now, how this impacts brand owners and manufacturers, and also how you can use this new rail link to take some pressure off on your current logistics. So Per, he has a master in international business from Linköping University. He started out with Maersk in 2005 in his native Sweden. And in 2020, he arrived in Vietnam, where he now heads up the industry verticals for retail and lifestyle for Vietnam, Cambodia, and Myanmar. So Per, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Tue. Let's see if we can get the slides up. Thanks for having me today. And yes, Tue mentioned, I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing with this intercontinental rail solution, where we've had the first trains leaving from Vietnam and going to Belgium and Liege in particular. So can we move to the next slide, please? This is what I'll talk about. So quickly, we just look at the sort of the market updates and the bottlenecks and the developments we're seeing from the supply side of what's happening right now. We'll translate that in what that means to brands or manufacturers or buyers of goods from Vietnam. And as Tue said, how we'll use intercontinental rail as a safety valve for particularly hot orders. We have already done it effectively starting in July, and I just share a quick case study of how we created this solution to deliver some value for one of our lifestyle customers. And if you want more details on that one, given the interest of time, you can just go to the A.P. Møller - Mærsk social media channels, where we have posted the full case study for Decathlon in particular. So that's what we'll run through today quickly. So can we go to the next slide, please? And next again. So I thought we'd start with this sort of high-level picture of what's happening a little bit globally, right? And if we're starting at the center of this slide, where we're talking about particularly what's happening in international transport, both from the ocean perspective and from the air freight, it's a case of, for been very significant challenges, basically starting in Q2 of 2020. Up until that point, from a shipper's perspective, it was generally a case of more capacity than what was needed, and everyone was enjoying some pretty cheap pricing. And then we've gotten into the situation we're in now, where that has definitely reversed itself, and it's very much the case of demand outstripping supply, like we haven't seen for decades, right? There's a few things that are driving this. So if we start from the ocean side, the tonnage deployment that we have now globally across all carriers, as I said, is not meeting the demand at the moment. And there's a few things that are driving that. There's been a sort of slowdown in new tonnage delivery. So ships haven't been built to the same rate as they were maybe 5 years ago. And that's, of course, had an impact. But what is really happening is in the short term compared to last year, where idle capacity that in Q2 for containerized ships, at least we're sitting sort of double digits, almost 11% of the total fleet was sitting idling, waiting for orders. Where we are now, it's less than 1% that is being idling, and that's generally very small vessels that don't really make a difference for long haul trade. So we've gone from a situation where there's an overflow of capacity to now being an extreme shortage, and that's obviously creating a lot of disruption across the world. At the same time, given the COVID situation we're in, short-term solution to this for many companies has been to air freight stuff instead. But now nobody's allowed to internationally travel, and needless to say, that means we don't have the flights to put cargo on. So we're leaving ourselves with a few options, and the options are decreasing continuously on the international side. And if we extend that out in sort of on the port side, both at origin and destination, we're seeing congestion across Asia Pacific, across Europe, US, and Australia, New Zealand. Basically everywhere in the world, it's very difficult to get ships into ports and get your containers out of the ports once they're there. There's a few things that are driving this. One thing has been the fact that containers sit on the port for longer periods of time. Mainly driven by demand surges and the volume that has increased. And we're seeing consignees at destination, they are only picking up their hottest containers, right? So the ones with urgent orders in them and leaving everything else for as long as they can inside the terminal. Here in Saigon, we saw that and having a severe impact on ability to clear containers through the port, because essentially it was an overflow of inbound cargo, meaning you couldn't get your full containers for export out again, and certainly no empty equipment coming in through the port. It's also impacting vessels in that they are waiting outside the ports longer than they have in the past. Needless to say, that's creating an even longer lead time compared to a normal situation, right? On the land side, so both for CFS facilities at origin as well as deconsolidation facilities at the destination, the COVID situation is causing a labor shortage, particularly in the sense that when we need to change out our teams, our blue collar teams that handle the cargo, it's extremely cumbersome from a approval and logistics perspective to get people in and out, because you have to go through the processes that everyone is aware of with testing and certifications and getting through roadblocks. And then also in many cases where we have these eat, sleep and work in the same facility, that means certainly casual labor is hard to come by, because it's not exactly a pleasant position to be in for the workers, where they have to be away from their families for months on end, living in a warehouse, right? So that's creating further bottlenecks. When we reach beyond sort of the ports and the warehousing and look at the links that connect it, so the trucking and the driver restrictions that we're seeing here. So in Vietnam, I think it's for everyone is aware of just how difficult it is to get anything delivered at the moment due to roadblocks and restrictions and the lack of drivers, since even when they are allowed, not everyone would like to get PCR tested 5 times a day at every facility they touch. So we're seeing a lot of challenges just getting stuff moving, both at origin and destination, due to the fact that there isn't enough trucking capacity and certainly not drivers available. This is increasing dwell times as well. So everything stays longer than it should or does under normal circumstances. I guess what this all leads up to, and I've talked a lot about these topics now, it's mainly a lengthening of international transportation lead times. What that means as an example is what used to be maybe a 45-day lead time to get into Western Europe or into inland US. A lot of those ocean lead times are doubled, meaning capacity is tied up, containers are sitting longer, it's a lot slower to turn the equipment around, meaning what we're seeing now at origin is that there simply is no containers available, right, to the usual extent. Aside from just this flow challenge, there's also a challenge with short-term leasing of container aren't available. And that's simply due to the lead times for new builds have also increased, just like every other industry. Seeing a lack of raw materials. So the steel that goes into building the containers takes an extremely long time to get. And that has driven both delivery lead times from the container manufacturers as well as their pricing to go up. So lead times are almost double as long, and pricing has doubled compared to sort of a 10-year average from the last time. So yeah, it's from our perspective as a shipping line and a logistics provider, there are multitude of cases and issues here that cause a lot of extension, and it's disrupting supply chains globally. And that's really the key here. We cannot look at this in isolation, that it's one thing happening in Vietnam, another thing happening in China, and then what happens in the US and Europe. They are all interconnected as part of a network of issues. And when one thing goes wrong somewhere in a very stretched network, it has impacts globally. And that's, I guess, what we're seeing right now. So can we please move to the next slide? And again, so from the brand perspective or the owners of goods, what all this translates into is some very significant challenges to meet consumer demand. For lifestyle and apparel, the demand has grown incredibly over the course of the pandemic as people's preferences have changed and what they spend their time on has changed. So we're seeing an incredible increase in demand for exercise equipment and athleisure apparel, hobby equipment, everything you need to be comfortable at home, or at least keep moderately healthy while we're all locked down. It's led to constant failures to meet demand. You see, if you try to order something from an online marketplace or a brand website, it's very, very long time before you would ever get any goods. So brands are struggling here with just keeping up with the demand that they're facing and making sure that they have inventory to sell. That means on-shelf availability, fulfillment metrics are suffering, and there's a desperate need for reliability that currently doesn't exist when you're relying on ocean freight alone. What we're seeing from a manufacturing perspective here in Vietnam is that there's a huge backlog of orders, both driven by the increase in demand, but then of course also as a consequence of the factory shutdowns that are happening here as COVID rips through the country, right? Before the factory shutting down, we already saw significant production overflow, meaning they were creating bottlenecks at factories where you simply couldn't get manufactured goods out. Storage facilities were used for housing workers already then, right, to keep production going. And it doesn't look like we're coming out of this anytime soon. As I mentioned in the previous slide, the ocean-driven supply chain is severely disrupted, and there is a clear need to be able to speed up and slow down finished goods lead times. And how you do that is tricky. Air freight has been the go-to for a long while, but it is extremely costly and also very detrimental to sustainability performance. So it's not a pretty picture for the brands either. And if we can move on to the next slide, please. So what we have done as a sort of, in essence, to create some sort of a pressure valve, knowing that the usual means of transport are sort of exhausted. We have looked at this intercontinental rail to use it as a safety valve for very time-sensitive orders or stuff that is going into seasonal promotions or relation to product launches, right? How this works is that we're connecting full block trains from Hanoi into the Chinese rail network and then riding on the back of the One Belt, One Road infrastructure going through China, Kazakhstan, Mongolia, and then into northwest continent of Europe. How it's the reason that it's been sort of working for the brands that we work with is that it provides reliability in the lead time that doesn't exist in the ocean side at the moment. You can also achieve a full network door to door, so meaning from production facility here in Vietnam all the way to DC or to store in Europe, depending on how you set up your trucking network to connect to the railheads. We have a dedicated team that works on this because there is still some operational challenges in making this work. The first trains we have done sort of worked for us as a proof of concept that it can effectively be done with all the necessary documentary requirements and coordinating between the multiple jurisdictions along the land route from Vietnam to Europe. Compared to air freight, there is an element of cost efficiency here, but of course it is significantly more expensive than the ocean freight. But for me, I sort of look at this at a necessary evil right now. It's still cheaper than air freighting everything you have. And of course, then compared to the air freight, it is significantly more ecologically friendly, meaning there's a higher degree of sustainability from the environmental performance perspective in using rail. Quickly to the next slide, please. This is a little bit of a detail of how this works, right? And I think it's very important here to point out that the lead time for this is roughly 28 days to get into Liege. But there is significant work that needs to happen before that in terms of the booking, the document preparation, and then stuffing of containers. So we're looking at now the quickest we can probably do this is 3 to 4 weeks, but a month notice in order to plan production and having everything ready to go at the same time is of critical importance. So what it does here is we go from the Yen Vien or Dong An rail station. It goes up and connects via Pingxiang or Zhengzhou in China. We have wagon reloading in either Mongolia or in Kazakhstan before it gets into the European side of the things, and the same happens in Poland. And then, yeah, in about 4 weeks' time, it arrives in either Liège or Hamburg, which are the preferred railheads for us at the moment. And from there, we can arrange on-carriage delivery depending to where the cargo needs to go. So for the time being, we have used this to deliver cargo into France, into Spain, into Italy, and into Germany. There is obviously an option there to intercept the cargo in Poland, in Malasiewicze, if it needs to go into Eastern Europe more, and it's not necessarily cost effective to take it, to drag it all the way out to the North Sea and then have it trucked back. Okay, next slide, please. And yeah, as I mentioned, this will be my last slide. We have done this for lifestyle customer, and if you want the specifics, please go to our social media channels where we have a better details on how we have done this for Decathlon. It's important here to mention also that intercontinental rail it really is a safety valve, given the fact here that we can only put 23 40-foot high cube containers on a train, which is never going to have enough capacity to replace ocean completely. So I think what the customers have done that have used this so far is that they have really taken a look at what is their production looking like, what do they need from a demand perspective, and which order needs to be prioritized. Clearly here, it's not only rail, it's the connecting from the origin as well as the delivery at destination, and it makes it easier to do it as sort of a one-stop shop where you include customs clearance and the handling to get it from the factory all the way to the required destination. This has now focused on how it works to get it from Vietnam to Liège, but of course it can work in reverse as well, but we might be able to take that in questions a little bit later. I think that's my 15 minutes.
Thank you very much, Per. It is now 2:20, and that means that we have arrived exactly on time, actually 1 minute early. So I think that says something about the future for this connection here. So thank you very much for that. I think this was a very interesting perspective here, and an interesting introduction to kick this off. I'm going to introduce now Christian Bautier. So he's a senior logistics specialist at the Wallonia Export Investment Agency, and he will comment on the destination, Liege, and the logistical options once the containers they arrive. And Christian, he has master degrees in both mechanical civil engineering and from IMD in Switzerland. And he has over 20 years of experience in quality engineering, global purchasing, project management, etc. So I think he is well versed to take the containers forward from once they have arrived. Thank you very much. Please, Christian.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to introduce my country, Belgium, and especially the Wallonia Logistic Valley. The Wallonia Logistic Valley has been developing over the last 20 years, step by step, not by chance, but because it was the right place to be to do the logistics for the global Europe. And everything you can find into that logistics valley is related to logistics. You can find train, airport cargo, and boat. Next, please. Just before we get in, I wish I can give a little bit of where is Belgium, where is Wallonia Logistic Valley, and what are the major logistic centers in Wallonia. Next. Where we are in Belgium, we are 11 hours from Hanoi by plane. We are quite 9,000 kilometers. And basically, if we look at how the world is going, international trading will continue to grow. So on the other hand, as mentioned before, global warming and pollution is a concern for all of us. The environmental conditions are maybe going to push us to do more of that kind of transportation, even if at the moment there is not enough capacity. Time will come where not the short-term issue of capacity will bring railway up front. If you look at the map, the way it's done, Belgium is central destination for Europe. You see it in yellow on the left, just in the middle of France, Autriche, Italy, and Germany. Next, please. So if we focus a little bit onto the map, Belgium is giving an easy access to European market. Within 1 day distribution around Belgium, you can reach Germany, most of France, Switzerland, London. Belgium is a central position in Europe to distribute, to do business to business or business to customer. You can use multimodal options all over the place, taking advantages of large fleets of trucks companies turning to green energy. Next, please. Let's focus a little bit more onto Belgium. Look on the left, Belgium, and if you do a radius of 300 miles, 500 kilometers around Belgium that you can reach basically in 1 day per trucking, you already have a lot of customers. If you do a radius of 500 miles, 2 days trucking, you reach most of the continental Europe. Due to the quality of the connection to this country, you can even do more than 300 miles per day. When you have a truck going to south of France can do it in 1 day. Going to Lyon can be done in 1 day. On the right part of the chart, you can see what's make us so well positioned in Europe. We are in the middle or at the edge of what we call the blue banana, which is a place where a lot of economical activities are taking place, coming from London, going through Belgium, Germany, Switzerland, Milano in Italy, Lyon in France, and ending in Spain. That blue banana is a place where, well, historically, most of the economical development of Europe has been done and is continuing. It's a direct access to 111 million people. The country around us, if you look bottom, is quite 200 million people, which at the scale of China is maybe little, but at the scale of Europe is huge. How are we performing in Belgium? If we take the logistic performance index, we are after Germany, after Sweden, but we are third, which makes sense because it has been a long time that we have been running logistics from Belgium to most of the place in Europe. So we got to have a good logistics, and we are pretty sure that our customer appreciate the service provided. Next, please. So, okay, that was Belgium, but the title of presentation is Wallonia Logistic Valley. So where is Wallonia? Next, please. So Wallonia Logistic Valley is quite the southern part of Belgium. You recognize on the picture of Belgium, and in yellow, you see what is Wallonia. So all Belgium is a country for logistics. It doesn't mean that north of Belgium is not a logistic place. No, we are all good in doing logistics, but I'm going to focus a little bit more onto Wallonia. So Wallonia is a place welcoming the Lounge country. We have facilities for railway service. We believe that we have fast and efficient logistics with supportive customs organization, large fleet of trucking companies. I will list a few of them. Warehousing included bonded warehouse, cross-docking, preparation, kitting, distribution capabilities direct to customer, and a dense network of highways and railways leading to everywhere in Europe. Top of it, we can say that we have good governmental organization helping business development like AWEC and logistics in Wallonia. Next, please. So what are the major logistics center? Next, please. Well, let's start because the train is arriving in Liege. So let's start with our today train destination, the city of Liege. The city of Liege is going to receive the truck. So let's focus what's going on in Liege, please. Next. So Liege has become the place to be for logistics by rail in Wallonia, and it has already outstanding railway structure. Liege is located on the right side up of Wallonia. Next, please. And since 2018, train has started to arrive in Liege, developing more and more. And today we have one train per day arriving at the moment, and that should continue to increase. Next, please. Okay, Liege on top of it. We can say that Liege is really a multimodal logistic place. You have the logistic airport, which is a 6 freight export, open 24 hours on 24. And we know that it's costly and it's not so much environmental friendly, but sometimes you need to deliver an emergency, especially vaccines or whatever medical care. And we can do it from Liege. At the bottom, you see that Liege is well located. If you have to take it by the sea, you have Rotterdam, which is 24 hours from Liege, Antwerpen, Zeebrugge, and Dunkirk, which are major airports around us. And if we go now to the trucking companies, we have major players around us. Transportation and warehouses are all around the place. In Liege, you have more, and around Liege, you have more than 600 logistic companies, which makes 30% of the total companies which are working in Wallonia, which, if you come to Liege, you will find one of them which is going to give you what you want. And I just put a few names out of the 600 on the right of the picture. Next one. So Liege benefits on top of its cargo airport. It's really the location in the middle of Europe. The multimodality. Antwerp is 14 hours barging. There are easy links with boat to Rotterdam, to Ghent. Liege port can accommodate in 9,000 tons barge. Large infrastructure can receive several full trains per day. And warehouse proximity availability is no question. Direct connection to highways will help distribution. And the 600 logistic company around Liege will help you to find what you want. Next, please. Let's take now a little zoom on what else can be found in Liège. You can see on the right the red circle, which is emphasizes the port autonome of Liège, the Trilogy port, and the place the train are coming, Liège-Renory. Next, please. I will take you to a few pictures to give you an image of what the port of Liège is. Here is the picture of that port, which is the third largest inland port in Europe at the moment. Next one. You have a picture of another major place in Liège, which is being developed at the moment. This is the final project. This is the final project. The buildings are being under construction. I would say that 50% of the construction are done, and the rest is coming. It's going to be just like that, probably by the end of next year. Next one. Of course, you have one train operator, Renory, which is the multimodal logistic operator in Wallonia, and I think that's the place where the train is going to arrive and be unloaded. Renory is already working with a lot of railway companies. Next one, please. But that's not only Liège. The logistic valley is starting, if you take it from the right, from Eupen, and is getting through cities, Liège, Huy, Namur, Charleroi, from right to left, Mons, Tournai, and Moucron, every of these cities, not by chance, because they were well located, because they were offering the right service to the customer, have developed logistic capabilities. Top of that, they are connected by boat, river boat, and they are connected by rail. So when you arrive in one of these cities with your goods, you can select the way you want to distribute. It can go further by boat, it can go further by train, or you can distribute by trucks, and you will find capacity, you will find warehouse, you will find bonded warehouse. Next one, please. So that logistic valley, which is running from Eupen on the right side to Moucron on the left side, is just 200 kilometers. That's not long. 200 kilometers, let's make it 2.5 hours, 3 hours, no more, to get from one place to another. And this is going to continue to improve because the government and the European Union policy will increase the rail transportation mode capabilities. Next, please. On the left, on the western part of Wallonia, you can find other places which are suited to do logistic activities. And take just two examples: Gare au Centre, La Louvière, and Charleroi Dry Port. Please, next one. Take a picture of multimodal in Gare au Centre. You can accommodate barge. You have the railway. You can use the trucks easily to continue to distribute your product. Next one. The next one is Renory in Charleroi Dry Port. Renory is specific. You can see on the right what is interesting sometimes, that the train can enter the building, the warehouse, and be unloaded, protected from the rain. The activity is mainly metallurgical products, which are shipped per train and per boat from that place. Next one. Another picture of what Charleroi look like if you wish to have your logistic done over there. Next one. And in the south of Europe, in the south of Wallonia, you can access the south of Europe just like some part of Germany, Switzerland, France, Luxembourg very quickly. The area is Athus, where there is a place. Next picture, please. There is a place where the multimodal has been developed, and the railway station is getting better and better. Next one. It's pretty damn difficult to summarize everything in such short time. So if you want to know more and learn more about Business Wallonia, I give you one place to go, in wallonia.be. You have the internet address. You will learn what we are, what we do, how you can find help. Next one. And if you want to have, you want to find partners in Wallonia, I would recommend you go to Logistic in Wallonia. You can search members, and when you got one, you got the reference to it. If you want to do business, there is an incubator. I gave you the name of Priscilla Tong, which is a logistic business partner in AWEX, specially dedicated to Asia. She speaks 7 languages. And the next one is my conclusion that I'm taking from Bernard Piet, who is the CEO of Logistic in Wallonia. Wallonia is an exceptional location, well placed to keep the region and the logistics sector on the move. You can find variety of transport, and on top of it, we are not stopping ourselves. We continue to invest to have automation, robotization, to stay competitive with time. I think that's it. Thank you for attention.
Thank you very much, Christian, and thank you for keeping the timetable here. We are still very much on time. We have heard now about the rail connection, and we have heard about how we connect further once we arrive. And now we have reached to the last mile, and we're going to understand more about the customs aspects. And for that, we have Tom Verbrugge, who's a partner in Customs Square, Belgium, and he will highlight more the formalities in point of view of importing into Belgium and Europe. So Tommy has a master's degrees in applied economics and tax law from the University of Leuven in Belgium. Tommy started his career within the Belgian practice of Deloitte. He has focused on customs and global trade advisory for more than 15 years. And in 2019, Tom started his own advisory company, Customs Square, based in Belgium and focusing on customs and global trade advisory. So Tom, please take us through the last mile of the journey here.
Okay, thank you for the nice intro. And also from my end, a warm welcome to all the participants. So for these last 15 minutes, we will move away a little bit from logistics, although not entirely, because when talking about free trade and customs matters, logistics is never far away. So I will take you to some customs elements linked with the free trade agreement between the EU and Vietnam. I will share some info on the concept of origin. We will highlight a number of elements which are included in this free trade agreement, and also formulating some recommendations for trade compliance, and end with a number of conclusions. Main purpose of the presentation is that I can shed a light on a number of elements which are important, allowing your business to benefit from a free trade agreement, because the free trade agreement is there. The issue is how to get benefits out of it and which actions you would need to take as an importing or an exporting company. So this is not a technical session. That was not the purpose. I hope to highlight a number of elements which will enable you to take some actions in your businesses where needed. Okay, I hope that's fine. We can move to the next one. So just raising some basic questions regarding to the concept of origin, because that's what a free trade agreement is mainly about. So to tap the benefits from a free trade agreement, you need to meet a number of origin criteria. It's not because the FTA is there that you can benefit from it. That was also one of the consequences of the communication around the Brexit agreement. Everybody thought there was free trade between the EU and the UK. Yes, that's obviously true if the origin rules are met, of course. And that's the same for the free trade agreement between the EU and Vietnam. So as you know, EU also levies anti-dumping duties on a number of goods. The question is, how do you manage, or how do you prove that your goods are really produced there or not? Next slide, please. Or if you're moving your products to another region, how do you prove that your products have been sufficiently produced in Europe with local content or not? And yeah, how do you manage to prove that towards the customs authorities? Next. In this presentation, we will focus on the concept of free trade agreements and the rules of preferential origin. the EU has concluded many free trade agreements, and not only the EU. If you would look at the world map and you would look at the total number of free trade agreements that have been concluded between countries, you would really be amazed. These free trade agreements are really a driver for business and can reduce duty costs in the supply chain to a very important extent. You see here some nice pictures, the signature of the agreement, which entered into force last year. But if you move to the next slide, you will see that these negotiations are not always easy. These take time. It's a combination of economic and political elements that are included there. It can be a long and difficult process. There's also a ratification process, also at the EU side, at the EU level, or even at the level of individual member states, and even regional parliaments can also oppose to some elements. So it's often a long way to get there, but the benefits that you can get out of it are really important if you are involved in trade between the countries concerned. Next, please. So regarding the concept of origin, so what a free trade agreement mainly deals with the concept of preferential origin or fiscal origin. That is in fact a set of rules which you need to meet in order to be able to reduce your customs duty burden when importing the goods under the free trade agreement. Free trade agreement is bilateral, so we have one set of rules which work in both ways. Trade from Vietnam to Europe, trade from EU to Vietnam. Same rules apply on both sides, and these sets of origin rules are embedded in, as we call it, an origin protocol, which is always added to the free trade agreement. So these rules really can have an important impact on the total customs duty burden in your supply chain. So we are really talking here about euros and dollars, which can really bring the cost of your goods down to a very important extent. Now, basic purpose of this presentation is the next bullet point. These advantages and these benefits can only be materialized when, one, the material conditions are met, so that your products really meet the origin rules. They contain sufficient local content to meet the origin rule, and we will come back to that. But on the other side, there's also the formal aspect. It's not only meeting the origin rules. The question is, how do you prove that? How do you prove that to your customers who are importing the commodities, or how do you prove that to the customs authorities in case of any retrospective audits of your supply chain? So that's what we will get into in the next couple of minutes. Okay, next please. So the EVFTA, EU-Vietnam Free Trade Agreement, is a very comprehensive agreement. As you will see, most of the customs duties will be abolished if the origin rules are met, and these advantages go obviously in both ways. You will see that a number of customs duties have been eliminated from the start, and that also for more sensitive products such as textiles and agricultural products, typically in FTA will gradually remove duties over a longer period. And you see here that some duties will be abolished over a period of 10 years. So let's say within now a period of 8-9 years, almost all customs duties could be avoided when the origin rules are met. Next to that, Vietnam also had some export duties. We were a little bit too fast. We just can one slide like this. Yeah. So export duties, that's something that we do almost not have anymore in the EU. Apparently, that was still the case in Vietnam. So also export duties, existing export duties, have been abolished under this free trade agreement. Yes, we can go to the next. So important, it's a bilateral trade agreement. So it works in both directions, and we have one set of rules which are applicable for Vietnamese exporters as well as from European exporters. How do we typically prove that your goods do meet the origin rules and your customers, importers, are able to benefit from it? There is a possibility to prove origin through certificates of origin. That's, so to speak, the old-fashioned way under free trade agreements, that the exporter issues or has validated certificates of origin, which then need to be submitted to the customs authority at the country of importation. Now you will see, if you look at the recent FTAs that have been concluded, amongst others with the EU, that authorities want to move away from physical certificates because certificates or originals get lost, stamps get falsified and stuff like that. So we move away from paper certificates to a system of statements on origin. And that's also what is available under this FTA. This means basically that the exporter of the goods issues a formal statement on his commercial documents, an invoice or another kind of commercial document, where he confirms as an exporter that the goods meet the origin rules. And based on that invoice, the importer can then tick the box and claim the duty preference upon importation. Now, there are some compliance obligations linked to that, and I will come back to that in a couple of minutes. Yeah. So what is important is that it's the exporter of the goods who must be able to prove through his records that the origin rules are met. And if these are met, that will lead to an important duty reduction at the importer side. So there is a big financial advantage when you are able to prove that your goods have sufficient local content and that the origin rules are met. Now, there's also a very important commercial aspect linked to that. If the exporter would have not been compliant, and in case a retrospective customs audit at the importing side would take place and would reveal that the origin was not really there, the duty bill and the penalties will be levied at the importer. So it's also important for you as an exporter that these rules are correctly applied, because the financial consequences can also be for your client, because he is the importer, he is the debtor of the duties. So if the origin is not met, he will get an additional duty bill. So not only financially important, but also commercially very important that you stick to the rules. Yeah. Yes, there's a specific aspect for EU exporters, but we will not go into the details here, that an EU exporter under this FTA would need a registration to issue statements on origin. That's a specific, not overly complex element that you would need to take into account. Now, what is important from a compliance perspective, that is that if you look into the origin protocols of an FTA, that the origin rules are mainly determined by the HS codes of your product. I assume everybody's aware that every commodity, every product has a commodity code, the typical 8 or 10 digit code, which you need to mention on any customs declaration upon exportation and importation. So it's important that these master data elements are correctly applied, because if you would start using wrong HS codes, you could get to the wrong origin rule, which we can see from the next slide. Next, please. Yeah. So you will see that the annexes to an FTA will contain a list of origin rules, which are really based on the HS codes of your products. I just quoted here two examples. So there could be a value rule. For example, the value of the non-local components should not exceed a certain percentage of the final value of your product. Or the HS codes of the non-Vietnamese components should be different from the HS code of the final product. So these are typically the rules that are embedded in an FTA based on the commodity code of your product. There must be more than insufficient working or processing. So very simple assembly is not sufficient. So there must really be some actual processing taking place locally. The activities must take place in the country itself. And then we have in the next point a bit the link with the logistics. These FTAs will also say that, yeah, it's allowed to have intermediate storage or splitting of consignments, but the goods need to remain under customs supervision in a free zone or in a customs warehouse. So that's also something that you need to take into account, having some control on your supply chain when invoking duty preference under an FTA. You can go to the next. So what are the main takeaways for yourselves when trying to get the benefits out of an FTA? That is that you would need to have an active interaction between the different divisions within your company. We have had cases where procurement divisions, they move to another slightly cheaper supplier for one component, but this could lead to a landed cost in the country of importation, which is much, much higher, because as a consequence of the change of one supplier, your product would not longer meet the origin rules. So it's very important to have the interaction between production, sales, finance, and tax. Obviously, the origin rules have an impact on your pricing strategy, because it really reduces the landed cost, and that's what it's all about, the landed cost of your product. And of course, an active communication with the customs broker upon importation is also very, very important and crucial. If the customs broker does not tick the box to claim the duty preference, you will pay the regular duties, which would still apply. So management of master data is really key here, and trade automation tools, ERP packages can also help to automate that process within your company. Next, let me move towards the end of the presentation. So what is important to prove local content? You need to have support from your local suppliers. They need to confirm to you that the components that they supply to you are really local, and they source them also locally. You need to keep track of your supply chain to avoid any uncompliant intermediate storage or splitting of consignments. In case to prepare well for any audits of customs, a segregation of duties within your company, importance. I mean, who within your company can decide that an origin statement can appear on an invoice or not. So for compliance, this is also very key. And important to work out a written procedure to manage the audits by the competent customs authorities. That's also an important takeaway. So if we would come to the conclusions. Next slide, please. And that's the final slide of the presentation. So I just want to make clear for you that gaining the customs benefits from an FTA is not a given. The FTA is there, the rules are there, but you need to make use of it. You need to meet the material conditions and the formalities. Master data is key. HS codes need to be correct, otherwise you risk to apply the wrong origin rule. Supply chain control is key. The bills of material of your products need to be under control in order to prove the local content. ERP support automation can really be an important differentiator. And of course, the cooperation of the exporter with his business partners through suppliers declarations, suppliers proving that the components that he has supplied are really local. So these are the main takeaways. So the FTA is there. The potential benefits are huge. It's up to you as a company, exporting or importing company, to take the actions and to make sure that you can prove the origin in a compliant way, and then your supply chain will take the benefits from this FTA. So I hope this was fine for now. I hope to highlight a bit the important aspects. I'm happy to take any questions at this stage or at any later stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll move. I've been giving a couple of minutes to maneuver this train actually into its final station in the Q&A session. So let's see exactly where we go. 2A is in the picture. It's me, Bart, speaking, but it doesn't matter. So as I said before, and I think Miss Anna also mentioned it already, there were about 20 questions which came up in advance, submitted by the audience, and they were very, very relevant. Plus, I saw in the chat box a couple of more questions coming up, of which some of them have been meanwhile replied already. So if I try to summarize the questions around two major blocks, if I try to put them a little bit together, then basically a lot of questions came in with very practical requirements. What is the cost per cubic meter? How many containers fit on a train? But that was already mentioned. I see in the chat box session by Per. What's the final price? What do I do with the containers once we arrive in Lutich and Liege? And how about the reverse way? I mean, because we're talking mainly from here to Belgium, but what happens actually on the way back? So maybe without going into all the details, Per, if I can forward this question to you, can you give us a little bit more insights on the practical arrangements? How many times a month is this running? Where do you get a price quotation? Who to contact for this? Can I book only one container, or do I have to book the whole train? Can you give some general insights on this, please?
Yes, no problem at all. So for now, we're only doing full block trains. So in order to book one, you have to commit 23 containers. And that's simply down to the fact that there's such a high demand now from very large shippers here that to make sure that things can move as quickly as possible, we have taken the standpoint that only full trains can be booked at this stage. That doesn't stop us from, in the future, looking at more consolidated trains and selling single containers. But for now, it's really up to this 23 containers for a full block train. And we have got weekly trains leaving right now. We are negotiating with our counterparts in China to make sure and see if we can increase that frequency, because we still see a very strong demand for this, right? But as long as we have this where it's one train per week and demand is definitely outstripping supply, then we're taking the approach of doing it by one train. So that question about what's the cost per cubic meter, it's really not something that I can get into right now, because it's really being priced on a full train basis. And ballpark figure is somewhere between $12,000 and $15,000 per container is the price right now. That's obviously quite inflated, but that's still lower than the current spot rates, if you can even get space on the ocean side, and certainly an awful lot cheaper than going with an air freight charter, for example. So that's sort of, I guess, the quick and dirty answer of it. But if there are any other questions, just look me up on LinkedIn or drop me an email, and I'll point whoever is asking in the right direction.
Just for everyone, for the whole audience, this webinar anyway is recorded. We will also make it available afterwards if you want to listen again to a certain part of it. And of course, we will give you all the contact details of the speakers. Other question, and it comes back a couple of times, is actually, and again, it's a bit for Per, I think, and maybe a bit for Piston. People would like to have a kind of an overview. The benefits, the advantages, disadvantages, sea freight compared to air freight, compared to train freight. So that's definitely something maybe which we can put together afterwards to come on a very high level. What are the advantages or the disadvantages of the three types of transporting goods? One of the things which came back several times in the questions was, is this going to be sustainable? Is this going to be something which is very interesting, like you said now, Per, because it's a complementary solution given the challenges for the sea freight and the air freight. But is this long term going to be sustainable once the sea freight charges are going to drop, hopefully again, in a matter of time? So I know we don't have a crystal ball, and I don't think Maersk is going to do something just for a week and then give it up. But is there? I'm sure you guys have been thinking about the longer term sustainability of this development. Any insights you can give us about that?
Yeah, so the way we're looking at this is exactly what you say, as a complement to the other more traditional ways of going about this, right? It is slower than air freight, but faster than ocean freight, and the pricing point is somewhere in between. So I think going forward, there will be a continued product to use from Vietnam into Europe. And I think my guess is that it will be used for that urgent orders that doesn't necessarily require the full air freight in terms of the urgency, but where there's still a need to be faster than ocean freight, and you can carry a little bit of a higher cost, because I still think it will probably be on a per container basis roughly 2.5 to 3 times more expensive than ocean freight, just to give you an idea.
Thank you for that. There are 2 minutes left for Tue, I think, to wrap it up and to bring this train home. There are many more questions, but we'll make sure that after this webinar, we'll answer all of the questions properly. We'll send them out in a little Q&A document afterwards to the participants. But I'll leave the floor right now to Tue to basically wrap up the webinar. Tue, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Bart, for taking us through this. And it's nice to see that there are so many questions, and hopefully the speakers can follow up individually afterwards. I just want to take this opportunity to thank also our 3 speakers here for excellent, short and crisp presentations, and also Phương and Anna from BeluxCham and Nordcham for organizing all this behind the scenes to make sure we get an excellent and well-organized webinar. Please keep eyes out on the social media channels of both BeluxCham and Nordcham for upcoming events. I think there has rarely been a time where it is as important to be part of a chamber of commerce in Vietnam than right now. And since both BeluxCham and Nordcham, we are part of the European chamber as well, this is also a good place to tune in and get the latest updates and help basically influence the agenda of what goes on in Vietnam. So if you are not yet a member, fear not, there is an opportunity to become member of both BeluxCham and Nordcham. I want to also just highlight that together BeluxCham, Nordcham, Eurocham and others are behind the Breathe Again Fund, where we are right now collecting donations, actually on behalf of the Belgian initiative, to provide and buy in bulk medical equipment to hospitals in Vietnam right now. And the beautiful part of this setup is that Eurocham is behind the logistics, so you can follow every dong being donated and how it transfers directly into equipment that we on top of this get at very good prices. So if you are looking for ways where you can have impact right now, then please look up the breatheagain.fund and donate for this, because it is really, really needed. Other than that, I just want to thank you all the participants for zooming in and joining us on this webinar, and hope to see you next time, and hope you all get your freight moving. Thank you very much.